serve on the Civic Association board, along with several other good people here. And tonight we're going to have Chief Lando of the Frederick City Police, along with his Lieutenant Holler, and also Lieutenant, or I'm not sure your title, Lieutenant Wiles, as well, as speaking to us. So I'll just give you a little background about, oops, I just lost it. Lost it.
Robert.
I increased the volume.
Can't hear you at all.
You know her?
Yeah.
Who's talking?
And we are going to ask if everybody can put themselves on mute. So when we begin the presentation, that way we can hear the speaker, the intro, without any interruptions.
Okay, so we're everybody on mute. Okay, so Chief Lando has been a police officer for the past 22 years, 21 of which were with the Bureau of Police in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Chief Lando came to Frederick about a year ago, almost a year ago. And I'm losing part of my screen here. After retiring as a commander in Pittsburgh, during his career, the chief had several different assignments to include patrol, undercover operation, and he worked himself all the way up to the ladder. And then, let's see, as a leader, Chief Lando's passion is working to bring police and the community together and find new and inventive ways to advance the law enforcement support with the help of the residents. When he's not doing the police activity, he loves to lift weights, try new restaurants, and he's also the proud father of Benson. I'm going to have him tell you the name of the animal because I can't pronounce it. Joining Chief Lando tonight are Lieutenant John Holler, who oversees the investigation division, criminal investigation division, and also with him will be Lieutenant Tracy Wiles, who also covers another one of the divisions that they'll explain to us. So as Lisa said, please put your questions either in the chat room or hold them to the end, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. At this point, Chief Lando, I'll let you take over.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for having us tonight. I see we have a really good crowd. I like to see that. Just so you know, when Diane said I was the father of a 6-year-old, that is a 6-year-old Weimaraner, very poorly behaved dog. I do not actually have any children of my own. So anyways, I thought we'd just get started. We have a kind of a brief PowerPoint. I'm much more a fan of question and answer, type of settings. I think it's important to let the community ask the questions that they have on their mind. So we don't want to take up too much time lecturing and giving you a PowerPoint. We'll just touch on some highlights of what's going on in the department and some of the crime stats in your area in particular. So let me see if my screen will advance here. There we go.
Perfect.
So we'll do a brief organizational overview, and these were some things that were requested of us when we were asked to speak tonight. So we'll do an organizational overview. I'll talk about a couple new programs and initiatives we have in the department. Tracy Wiles, who's one of our lieutenants that oversees a patrol division, will talk to you specifically about crime in your neighborhood. Lieutenant Holler runs our criminal investigations division. He'll just give you a little overview over what our detectives do and how they investigate crimes. And then we'll finish with a question and answer, and we'll leave plenty of time for that.
Thank you.
So our police department is divided into 2 different divisions. We have operational services, which is under Captain Henneberry, and special services, which is under Captain Hare. And under operational services, that's all of our patrol officers. So anyone you see in our blue and white cars driving around, they work in the patrol division. And we also have an area of the department called special operations. So our community outreach, our school resource officers, our auxiliary officers. So they're not sworn officers that take 911 calls, but they help us at major events and they help us at community events. Our lead program, and we'll talk about that in a minute, our new crisis car program, and also our police chaplains. They all fall under Captain Henneberry as part of the day-to-day operations. Special services includes all of our detectives, so that's criminal investigations, and Lieutenant Haller will get into that. I don't want to steal his thunder. Technology and services. So basically anything with a battery or anything that plugs into the wall falls under technology and services. And I put that up there because so much of what we do day to day, you will never see or hear about. Everything from our body worn camera program to our accreditation, to our records division, all of those things are necessary to help the police department run, but they're just not things that the public ever sees. There's probably more that goes on behind the scenes than in front of the scenes. Our communications division, so we have our own dispatchers. We have about 15 people that work in dispatch, so they're making sure the officers get to the 911 calls. And then our support services division, and that's our personnel and our training. We run our own police training academy, and there are actually other agencies that send their officers to us to get their training because of, we're just a highly respected agency in the area. So we train other police departments. So the Frederick Police Department is accredited by an organization called CALEA. And the reason I bring this to your attention is CALEA, it's very difficult to become accredited. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. Here's just a couple bullet points here. I'll let you read them. I'm not going to read the slides to you. But really only about, I want to say it's about 5 to 10% of the police departments in the entire country have devoted the time and effort and the resources to become CALEA accredited. And what that means for you is we're really, how, for lack of a better term, we're at the top of our game, right? We do everything according to best practices and national standards. And that's not something that every police department does. And that's something that you here in Frederick should actually be really proud of, that your police department has attained and maintains that accreditation. So a couple new initiatives that I wanted to touch on. Now, some of these things have been in the media, so some of you may have heard of them and some may not have. One of the things I'm most proud of that we've started is an initiative called the Crisis Car Program. And what we've done is we've collaborated with the fire department, so DFRS, Department of the Division of Fire and Rescue Services, and Shepherd Pratt, which is a local mental health provider. And every day, Monday through Friday, for a couple hours a day, currently we're in the pilot phase. These are three of the individuals you see on the screen, and we have one from each organization. So on the far right is a police officer, in the center is a mental health provider from Shepherd Pratt, and on the left is an EMT firefighter. And the three of them work in that car every day, and they go out in the community and they handle calls for individuals that are suffering from mental health crisis. This is something that's really prevalent in our community in particular, but really nationally. Police officers have been called too often to deal with situations where people are in crisis. Our officers do the best job they can, but they're not always the best person to respond when someone's having a mental health emergency. So we decided here in Frederick to try and put all three of these disciplines together in one car, and we send them out in the community and they answer calls for people that are having these types of emergencies. Sometimes maybe the police officer is the one who's needed. Sometimes people still have to get arrested, but sometimes the person just needs someone to talk to. They need some counseling. They need to go to the hospital. So this team goes out there and they're able to kind of collaboratively solve those problems. So right now we run the program 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Starting in the next month or two, we're going to expand the program, and it's going to run 8 hours a day, typically from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 at night, Monday through Friday. And our hopes are, as the months and years go on, we'll be able to build the program out to where we're able to run this around the clock 7 days a week. So we're not there yet. It'll be a while, but the next phase is to expand it to 8 hours a day. Another program we recently launched, and it's in its pilot phase, and the area that we're going to be looking at is downtown in particular before we expand it to the rest of the city, is called LEAD. And what that stands for is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And it's individuals who, these aren't people that commit violent crimes, right? These are not people that are doing shootings or robbing banks. These are some of our lower level crimes. And sometimes we find that the people that commit these crimes, they have other things going on in their lives. Some of them are addicted to drugs. Some of them are in situations where they're homeless. They're facing poverty conditions. So there's things that are driving them to commit these crimes. And we're not saying it's okay to do these things, but they're kind of in a desperate place in their lives. And so the LEAD program, instead of arresting them and putting them on probation, the LEAD program is designed to really, we press pause on the criminal charges, and we give them a chance to meet with some individuals, and they build a program specific to that person's needs to try and get their life back on track, right? So if it's someone who is homeless and they're shoplifting, arresting them and putting them on probation, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the person. It doesn't help the community. That person's just going to go back out and steal again because they're homeless. So really what it does is it tries to build a customized program for the person to get them back on their feet, get them the services they need, and hopefully address the underlying issues that are causing them to commit some of these lower level crimes. And so we're really interested to see how this program works. It's launched in other cities, and some of the numbers have come down pretty significantly as far as crime stats after they've evaluated the program after about 6 months or a year. So we're going to do the same thing here. We'll run it as a pilot for a little while, and then we'll reevaluate, and we'll make sure it's having its desired effect. We established what we call a multicultural liaison unit, and we identified 5 communities across Frederick that typically have not had the best relationship with law enforcement. This is not unique to Frederick. It's nothing against our officers. I think our officers do a great job. It's more of a trust thing as you look across the country. Between African-American communities, Asian American, our Hispanic and Latino communities, our LGBT communities, and deaf and hard of hearing. You often see there's a breakdown between police and community. Sometimes people are afraid to report crimes. Sometimes they're just afraid to call 911. So we've identified officers that have a special connection to each of these communities. So when something happens, if someone doesn't feel comfortable calling 911, these officers are kind of seen as that trusted figure in that community, and the community members can reach out to those officers in particular. So we've had a couple of success stories with that program. I'm looking forward to also seeing how that grows in the future. So these are 2 things. The next 2 slides are some plans we have for the future. As the city of Frederick grows in size and population, we have to be ready to address the increased traffic in our city. I'm sure even out at Warman's Mill, where you all live, you've noticed the growth has been pretty tremendous. I'm actually out there all the time. I live close by, and I go to the gym and the grocery store out there, and I just notice how busy it is and how congested it is with traffic. So right now, we're looking at in fiscal year 23 to plan in our budget to hire enough officers where we can designate a full-time traffic safety team. And that would be those officers, that would be their job every day. There'd be a supervisor and a few officers, and they would go out all across the city and they would address traffic concerns. So whether it's unsafe conditions, speeding, working school zones, handling collisions across the city, I really think a department in a city of this size should have a dedicated traffic unit. So that takes time, right? It takes time and it takes money and resources. So we're trying to plan for that in next year's budget. But I thought it would be particularly important to bring that up tonight because it definitely affects your area in particular as you continue to grow. And then the last thing I have for you before I hand it over to Lieutenant Wiles is our new police headquarters. We already own this building, and this is over at 100 East All Saints Street. It used to be the Social Services Building. I would show you the building we're in now, but you don't want to see it. It's very, very small. It's very cramped. Just to give you an idea, we're working with about 25,000 square feet now. And we've had to expand into space across the street under a parking garage. This new building will have 65,000 square feet and will be able to serve as the police department's home for many, many years into the future. One of the nice things about it is the first floor is going to have a large community space. And so if we have, the Warman's Mill Community Group wants to have an event or a meeting somewhere, you're welcome to use the community space at our police department. We can do community training and stuff there. So really looking forward to that. We own the building now, but now the real work starts where we have to design and build out the inside to suit a police department. And we anticipate sometime in mid-2024 that we'll be in that building. So those are just a few of the things we have going on in the police department now. So what I would ask, just so we can kind of keep rolling, is I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Wiles. She's going to discuss some crime stats, and then Lieutenant Holler will do his part. And then at the end, please feel free at the end to ask any questions of all three of us. So Tracy, you are up.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As the chief said, I am the commander currently of the patrol division. We do have 2 patrol divisions, as you saw in the breakdown. That's just the mere fact that the majority of the department is in patrol. We have about 78 officers assigned to patrol. So we have 2 divisions. They work opposite days, and each division has 3 squads. So we have permanent shifts. Officers are on days, evenings, or midnights, and they work those permanent shifts. It's better on the body instead of switching, from days to evenings to midnights. And it's gotten some good feedback from the officers that are working it. So I share my duties with Lieutenant Corrado within the patrol division. So as you see up on your screen, these numbers include the stats for the entire city. So this is not specific to Warman's Mill. This is the entire city. The majority of the crime has been down. 2020 was obviously not a normal year with COVID and everything going virtual and things being closed down. So looking at those numbers, it can be difficult going from 2020 to 2021 just because of that variable there with COVID. So Chief, if you want to move ahead, these are for Warman's Mill, your area in which you live. You see the 5-year breakdown there. Now you see it may be alarming. The calls for service went up quite dramatically in 2021. The next slide will break that down as to what those calls were. So just looking at the chart you see there, it can be very alarming, but if we move ahead to the next slide, we'll see that the majority of those, let me move my little box here so I can see, the majority of those calls for service were things such as 911 hangups, car accidents, patrol checks, which patrol checks are proactive numbers that officers generate themselves to go into areas and maintain checks, just have a visible presence there to deter crime and obviously take any action on crimes that they may interrupt or see being committed. So we'll see that the majority of that 755 is patrol checks, 911 hangups, and car accidents. Now, I don't have to tell you guys, you deal with the traffic up there every day. So you know all that construction, the new Walmart, the Chick-fil-A, the Starbucks, all those businesses open up right in the area of the residential community up there has caused a lot of traffic. It's very congested. And with that, the more people, more cars, we're going to have more car accidents. Corporal Golden works in my division. He is also the supervisor of the traffic. But we have a kind of decentralized traffic unit right now. So each squad has a handful of officers that have demonstrated proficiency or has an interest in traffic enforcement. And we've asked them to be our designated traffic guys. So they'll go out each shift and do some selective enforcement in our problem areas. He also runs a crash reconstruction team. So as the year came to an end, he's preparing that 2021 report. So I'll have more information if you have any specific questions about why that traffic accident number is higher. I would have a better answer for you after Corporal Golden gets done compiling that data. But for the most part, they're probably going to be property damage accidents, so a rear end or something like that, that didn't have any injury associated with them. Most of the other calls for service are just, your general calls for service that officers are handling on the day-to-day. You'll see the little box over there that says focus 4 crimes. There are a lot of studies out there that show these 4 crimes are a good forecaster, and the offenders are the ones that we deal with most often in our job. So you see the burglary. In 2020, we had 0 burglaries, and this is again just for Warman's Mill community area. No burglaries reported. In 2021, there was 1 burglary. That TFMV is theft from motor vehicle. So these are the crimes where if doors are unlocked or forced entry to gain entry to a car to steal. Again, we had 0 reported in 2021, which is a decrease from previous years. NVT is motor vehicle theft. So no motor vehicle thefts reported, and robbery. So for Warman's Mill, you guys are doing excellent up there with very, very low crime. Hopefully it's because of those 181 patrol checks that our officers are up there doing. So that's a quick and dirty rundown of the calls for service overall in the city, calls for service breakdown for Warman's Mill. And I will hand it over to Lieutenant Holler, who will go into a little bit of the criminal investigation side of things.
Good evening. I'll start my video. The reason I didn't have it prior to this is because you'll see 4 little kids running around behind me, on top of me, and everything else. So I tried to save you that scene. Lieutenant John Holler. I am the commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, which incorporates our Major Crimes Unit, which handles our violent crime, our special investigations, major thefts, major frauds, and then our special investigations, which will be your sex crimes, your child abuse, and such. And then also under our divisions, our Tactical Investigations Unit, which is primarily encompasses what we call the drug unit and what most people would know it by. And then our crime scene unit as well. Lucky for you guys, a lot of the incidents occurring in your area never hit my division because they're, I don't want to call them relatively minor, but relatively minor in that a patrol officer can handle those investigations for the most part without the need for increased supervision over it from one of our detectives. So when a major crime does come in, and if you hear my kids and my wife yelling upstairs at them to get them into bed, I apologize. But when a major crime does come in, depending on what it is, it'll be handled by the patrol officer, reviewed by their supervisors, and then ultimately kicked over to my side of the street in the criminal investigations. From there, it'll be assigned to a detective to start the investigation. One of the things we pride ourselves in and try really hard to do is have close contact with the victims and those associated with the crimes and keep them updated throughout the process. We have had a few major crimes around your area. The most notable, and I'm sure all of you are aware, is the Burger King homicide, which was a great effort by our team working with a lot of other agencies as well to bring a resolution to that. So whereas you guys are doing very well where you are, I'm not ignorant to the fact that there are plenty of crimes around you that we are aware of. We're keeping an eye on, and we're doing everything we can to prevent. With that, I'll leave it to the chief, and if anybody has any questions.
Okay, thanks, John. So we just wanted to give you a brief overview and really just allow you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have. One thing before we get to questions that I would encourage everyone to do, if you have not already, is, and unfortunately, I don't think you can just click, it won't appear as a link for you because it's on a PowerPoint. But if you type this into your browser, you can sign up for certain alerts with the city. So whenever there's a serious crime, major investigation going on, something the community should be aware of, you can actually get an alert. So you can go to this link and sign up for that. And I'll put it back. Actually, I can email Diane the link afterwards and she can forward it out to everyone. And that way you can just click on it. And then here's some contact information. So Alan Etzler was our police public information officer. He has been promoted, so he's the manager of communications for the city right now. And he oversees all of the NACs. And I don't believe, Alan, you're not on tonight, are you? I don't believe you. I think he has a conflict tonight. He has another meeting. And then our NAC contacts are up here as well. And these are all supervisors in the department. And Tracy, what's that? What
Yeah.
NAC are they in?
I apologize. I skipped over the NAC information. I was supposed to cover that.
Go ahead. Why don't you touch on it?
Yep. So you guys are in NAC 3, which if you go into the city's website, you can type in your address and it will give you, it should pop up which NAC you're in, and it should give you these contact information. We try to keep that contact information up to date the best that we can, but we do have a lot of frequent transfers at times. Given the time of the year, it can be a different person, but anybody on that list would be able to help you. And what the NAC is, it's Neighbor Advisory Council. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it's basically, it's in the virtual platform, but it has been in person previously. I think you guys meet at the Warman's Mill Clubhouse is where your meetings usually were. Now they're virtual, as I said, but it's the opportunity for community members to come out and get answers to some of their concerns. The city can have any city department represented at those NAC meetings. So it's not just a police meeting. However, we do attend them they're I think quarterly now. Some are monthly, but I believe yours is quarterly. And every quarter we will present you with stats. We'll present you with any new information, any department news that you would want to know. And if there are other concerns with such as code enforcement, DPW, any other city department that you would want to ask questions or you have concerns with, you let the NAC coordinator, who is Mr. Etzler, know, and he can work that out and have that representative there so you can get the answers to your concerns. Like I said, we're there every meeting, so we also answer any crime questions that you may have. But if you guys have anything, those guys, Sergeant Bournes, Corporal Dotson, and Corporal Wilson will be your contacts.
Thank you. So now we open the floor to questions. I'm not sure how much time we have, but we wanted to give as much time as possible for anyone to ask any questions they have about the police department.
Okay, for questions.
Who's on
I'm
chat?
gonna ask that there's a little button down where is a little it says reactions. If you raise your hand and we will call on you, then you can unmute yourself. Okay, and then once you're finished, lower your hand and then you can mute yourself back, mute yourself after you've asked your question. So what we're gonna do is, I think we'll stop the screen sharing so everybody can see the gallery.
Okay.
Diane, you have a question.
Well, I always have questions. So I was just curious. I'm not sure that, I think this is Tracy, but I'm not sure, but whoever wants to answer it. I noticed that our patrol checks in the Warman's Mill area significantly went up in 2021 over the rest of the chart, and also the vandalism. Do you have any reason behind that?
Well, I can definitely tell you the number of patrol checks went up as the officers we were more in a reactive role through the COVID crisis, not meaning that they weren't doing their jobs. They were just taking extra precautions and were more visible, having more of a visible presence to deter the crime instead of, other traditional methods that may put the workforce at risk as well as the residents. So that's probably accounting for the significant increase in patrol checks and also the growth in the area. Before, when there wasn't a lot of activity up there, there was just the community officers may drive through and they may not start a number. This is also just capturing the times that the officers actually started and generated a call for service. Other times they drive through the neighborhood and they may not, start a number, but they're still in the area. As far as the vandalism, I'd have to look into that. I don't know, other than maybe because kids were out of school and had nothing else to do. But I can dive into that and see if I can get you an answer of that.
Okay, I was just
And
curious.
Tracy, can you define when you say Warman's Mill area?
The crime analyst drew her mapping software. So I believe I did see that Tuscarora Knolls, I believe, is in the front of your neighborhood, correct? Like Moseport and Jubal Way. That was not included. So it's like everything from, drawing a blank of what that road is called.
Monocacy Boulevard.
Road.
Yeah,
Liberty
I
Road.
don't know why, sorry.
Actually,
Everything from
Tracy,
Monocacy. I'm sorry,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead,
pull,
Gene.
I'll pull Jen's map up in a second and I'll share the screen
Okay.
so they can see.
Okay, great. Because our thing was Tuscarora, included in that. I know our other neighborhood next to us is county, so that would not have been included, Waterside.
Yes, correct, right, Waterside, yeah. And if the chief pulls that up, from what I only looked at her mapping quickly, but I believe that Tuscarora Knolls was not included in it.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure of, yeah.
You're right, yeah. So it's kind of small there, but it looks like Mill Island Parkway, the borders.
Yeah, so that is all of Warman's Mill,
Yep,
yes.
so that's where the calls for service were.
Thank you.
Yep.
Because sometimes it gets confusing when they say Warman's Mill area, what they mean.
Oh,
Any other questions?
I know. Yeah, I have my hand raised. I have my hand raised. Oh, shit.
Right ahead.
Okay.
Okay, we have, how do you use body cameras? And can you track their location?
So anytime an officer, when an officer is on a call, or if they make a traffic stop, they encounter a citizen, they are required to turn their body cameras on. I believe that there is the ability to do GPS tracking on the cameras. We do not have that functionality. You'll find the vendor we use is called Axon, and they're kind of the industry leader. And they're very, very good, but every single thing they do costs money. So, for right now, we don't track by GPS. We just don't have that need right now. But anytime an officer contacts a citizen in an official capacity, not if they're out having coffee and they talk to someone, they don't have to turn their camera on. But if they're called to a scene, they do have to turn their camera on. And the interesting thing is,
That's what I got.
no one wants to be recorded their whole day, right? But as we've rolled the cameras out, and I saw this back in Pittsburgh because we rolled them out about 8 or 9 years ago back there. And at first everyone hated the cameras. But then as officers were accused of doing things and we watched the cameras and we found out that the officers were doing the right thing. They were obeying the rules and they were doing what they needed to do. And that cleared them of wrongdoing. Now all of a sudden they started to really, they didn't want to leave the station without their body cameras. So there's a learning curve there. But I think that they do much more good than not. So it's a win for us.
Okay, and we have Arnold.
Yeah. I
Hello.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
okay,
ahead.
what I wanted to know was with the crisis car,
I got you.
what happens if there's a mental health issue and the police respond and it's 2 o'clock in the morning?
So, and ideally, at some point, we'd love to get to where we can support that car around the clock. I think our next phase is going to be to move towards early in the morning until late at night, because overnight in the city of Frederick, we just don't have that many calls that would warrant having that car. And that's when we rely on, the patrol officers or the paramedics, whoever gets the call, if they believe the person's in crisis, to call the necessary resources or take the person to FHH. We have to start somewhere. So we started with a 4-hour-a-day pilot with the idea of just growing the program as time goes on. But so right now, if you were to call at 2 a.m, you would get a Frederick, probably more than one Frederick police officer You might get an ambulance as well. But, and Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, the mobile crisis workers, they don't work overnight, right?
That's correct. Typically, they're not in. I think it's until 11.
Okay. So yeah, so for right now, the police and the paramedics would likely be the ones to deal with the situation overnight.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
John, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm John Dilly. Welcome to the chief and some of my fellow neighbors, actually. In speeding deterrence for a couple of years here. And I would like to say that we've made some headway, but with all the new traffic patterns we now have, it's become a real issue and sometimes a bottleneck for traffic. Now, it's bad enough as it is, and I'm not saying that the police department isn't trying to do something about it, but I'm worried about the light on Monocacy when it starts operating and how people are going to start traveling up Waterside even more than they are now to cut out all the other lights near the Walmart area to get across to Wegmans and the gym in that area. I suspect that whatever cars we have cutting through now, we will probably expand exponentially to an issue where I would like to offer working with the police department in trying to come up with other than putting flash signs up, which haven't worked in the past. Some other neighborhoods have signs along the road that have little gimmicks about the neighborhood and watch the speeding for the kids and stuff. We are not allowed to do that in our neighborhood. So I'm just throwing it out there. If anybody else has any bright ideas, I welcome them. But thank you in advance for I know what you're going to do. And please feel free to include me in any working process you'd like.
I appreciate that. And just so everyone knows, because I think a lot of people don't even realize this. I did not realize this for a long time. So the police department, we have no say over traffic control devices, signs, speed limits, all that stuff is coordinated through the Department of Public Works. Not to throw them under the bus or anything like that, but we couldn't, we can't change speed limits. The police department can't do that. And we can't, put up new signage. We can't put speed bumps out. That's all kind of there's a whole master plan that goes into doing that. But I do appreciate your concerns. And
well, we have put speeding signs up in the past on Bear Den, attached to poles kind of thing. And I don't know who was responsible for that. But I propose that they were not placed in the right place. And I think the neighborhood people could have a better judge of where the traffic is coming and going, especially in and out of the driveways, which slows down any of the speed recordings.
I would say any suggestions that you have for improvements, send to and I'll get you all the contact information, but on that previous slide, the supervisors that in charge of the NACs, if you get them your concerns, if they're not the ones that can handle it themselves, they'll get it to the right place.
Excuse me. Actually, it would be the urban planner who would have that information.
Yeah, DPW, they all work together. They do studies on everything before they post any signs or any traffic control signals. So.
Not to be rude or anything, but I've heard all that before. And it worked for like a week or two, and then it was passed on, or I was told the signs had to go across the city to some other place. And that just really didn't work. And I think we need a stronger commitment from a group inside of the community working with whoever you think is responsible for that, so that we can keep charge. I actually got a printout at one time about cars going by and what their speeds were. So it is possible that we can get to that point. So, you know, I'm out there. Give me a call.
Thank you.
John. Thank you. Is there any other questions for Chief Land?
Yes, I have another question.
Go ahead.
What percentage of the Frederick Police Force has been vaccinated?
I
Because these are
believe,
people that might come into my home.
so I believe right now, that at last check, we're at 75% of the department. But I will also add that our officers must wear a mask anytime they're not alone. So in other words, if they are riding to a car, if they are in someone's home, if they're in a business, if they're on any call for service that's not outside, they have to wear a mask. And I can tell you that, you know, we see the officers out and about all the time. And when they are in homes, and we see them on body cameras in the homes, they are wearing their masks. But if you do have to call 911 and the officer shows up, you know, and they get out of the car without the mask on, just a friendly reminder, I'm sure will go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Diane. Diane, I think you're on mute.
There we are. I'm just curious, Chief Lando, about how many guys or women or people do you have on your force? I'm just curious what you have here in Frederick.
So our total staffing right now is 200 people, and 150 of those are sworn police officers, and 50 are civilians. And so our civilians do things like dispatching. They do records. We have a victim advocate. So they do kind of all the stuff that's not frontline patrol. Our crime scene technicians, so when there is a crime and they're out there dusting for fingerprints, they look like police officers, but they would be considered civilians. So, but we have 200 total staff.
Wow, that's huge. Okay, no wonder you have a bigger space. So.
With all the building going on, there's a lot of building going on just around here, but throughout the entire city. Are you going to foresee a need for a larger staff?
Yes, we did foresee that need, and we're actually in next year's budget, we actually made the request to add several positions. So we're asking to, and realizing now, every department in the city is dealing with their own respective growth. You know, DPW has more roads to plow, and you know, everyone has their wish list, and so we all have to work together to come up with one budget. But we're going to be asking for about 8 additional police officers and a couple more dispatchers and some civilian staff. So roughly 15 people we're asking to increase the department by.
Okay, great, thank you. Question, go ahead. Norm.
Yes, at the risk of sounding political, and I don't mean to, can you identify what are the biggest issues that you face, the biggest challenges that you face, whether it's insufficient funding, insufficient resources, lack of community involvement, or drug distribution? You know, can you identify the things that make your job the hardest?
So what I'll do is I'll give you my perspective, and I encourage both of the lieutenants to give theirs as well. Just so you know, they've both been here a lot longer than I have. But you know, the one thing I've noticed, I would say, mental health. You know, as far as the calls we go to, mental health, it's a big thing here, and I believe that's because countywide, all of the services that you can get in the whole county are all downtown. So that kind of draws some folks downtown, and they come downtown to get those services, and then they stay there all day. And then that results, the end result is that our police officers are constantly called to individuals that are suffering from issues revolving mental health and drug addiction. So I would say that's a big deal for us. Much more so, I would say, much more so than violent crime. You go to a place like Baltimore, I think you're going to see something much different. Their violent crime is through the roof. We're very lucky here. We don't have a high amount of violent crime, but we do have a lot of people that are struggling with mental illness. As far as the community goes, I think we're very lucky here. The city, the police department, we have a lot of community support. I've never experienced anything like it in my career. I'm not used to this. There's an outpouring of support from our residents, and I think it just goes to show that the officers that are out there every day, they're doing the right thing, and that's why they get that support. But I'm curious to hear what Tracy and John, what they think are the biggest challenges.
I guess I'll go first. So as the chief said, I apologize. I didn't give any background on myself at all, other than I was the current patrol commander. I started with the agency as a civilian, as a dispatcher when I was 19 years old, back in 2001. And whenever I turned 21 and I was eligible, I became a sworn member of the agency. So I have been around a little while. And I grew up in Frederick County. I grew up in Walkersville, so I'm homegrown here. So I would say the dynamic of policing has changed a lot since I became sworn in 2003, for good and bad. As the chief said, the community is overwhelmingly supportive of our agency, which we are very fortunate. However, most of the population that we come in the most frequent contact with, those that are, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, it seems as if we are having more folks that aren't as compliant, folks that want to fight or resist arrest. And that, in my opinion, and I'm at the level that I'm not every day on the street, I think that just takes a toll mentally on the officers. So as a department, we have worked towards focusing more on officer well-being, officer mental health. Inside the department, we need to watch out for one another and make sure that we're being supportive of one another, because as I said, it overwhelmingly the community supportive. Is just those instances of those people that they deal with on the daily that, they are getting that backlash from. So I think from my perspective, that's one thing that's overwhelmingly disappointing, I guess, to say. And then the mental health and the drug addiction. Previously, I was the supervisor of the directed patrol team, which focuses primarily on downtown. That was a huge issue downtown. Most of the downtown issues can be put back on homelessness, which typically is a result of drug addiction or alcohol addiction, and mental health issues, and just trying to get services and resources to those folks that are just resistant to it. It can, take a toll on you, dealing with the same person and seeing them just kind of in this cycle and not taking the help and trying so hard to give them that help, and they're just resistant to it. That also takes a toll on an officer. Well, because at the end of the day, we're all people, and we want to see people thrive and people be happy, and it's just that can be draining.
Can I have another question, please?
Go right
This is
ahead.
John Dilly.
You may, and I can
Are
see
you
you.
there? I'd like to know who the contact point is for volunteer assistance.
Boy, that's a good question, Tracy. Are you talking about? I mean, the volunteers that we have are our auxiliary officers.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Somebody in an auxiliary car.
That would be Sergeant Rebecca Corrado would be your contact for that.
Phone number?
I don't have her phone number. I can look it up online here and put it in the chat for you. Hang on.
Okie dokie. Sergeant Rebecca.
Corrado, C-A-R-R-A-D-O.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Hi, it's Lieutenant Holler again. Sorry, I got booted out only because I forgot to plug my computer in. So I didn't get a chance to speak in reference to the biggest issues that we're seeing right now. I just want to add to that a little bit if they weren't covered as brief minutes that I was out. COVID is still playing a big role in everything that we're doing, whether it's actually officers getting COVID or the fear of getting it and giving it to their families. So multiple times throughout the past 2 years, we went to a reactive model of not actively pulling cars over and conducting patrol checks, and then going back to a proactive model of actually pulling cars over. And it's a lot of back and forth on the guys. So that's been a tough thing to get over and move on from. And we're not out of it yet is the biggest thing. So that's played a big impact and a big toll on our officers and their families together. The department as a whole, as we lose officers to quarantines and infections and symptoms. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I feel like we're dealing with right now that's not community related. Community related, one of the biggest issues that we continue to see, not so much out of your area based on the stats, is just not locking cars is what's driving our theft numbers up probably the most throughout the city in general, especially on the west side of town. So another attaboy to you guys, but so it's just the crimes of opportunity that we can prevent as a community as a whole. Certainly we're going to investigate all those regardless, but that's where the community can really help the police department out, is just hitting that lock button before they go to bed and throughout the day, locking the doors before they leave. We all want to think we live in a safe community, and overall, if you look at the stats throughout the city, we do. But we can live in a safer community too, and there's steps that we can all take to make sure that happens. So sorry to cut in a little late, but
Oh, no, that's okay. Thanks, Jay. Thanks. And Jane, do you have a question? You have to put yourself off. Take yourself off mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wait a minute. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering, Chief Landau, are you having more difficulty now recruiting police officers because of maybe the backlash politically of communities saying that racism within the police department, or defunding potentially police departments? How do you go about getting qualified officers? Are you having more problems, or how do you actually go about this?
That's a great question. So I could tell you that the policing profession, so when you look nationally, the policing profession is having a very difficult time recruiting candidates. When I took a test to become a police officer, I took the test in 1999. And when I took the test, I sat in the convention center in Pittsburgh because 2,500 of us went to take the test. So they had to stick us in the convention center. My last year on the job, when I retired, we had 300 applications. So that shows you kind of where things were going, kind of on a larger scale. In Frederick, sure, we have our struggles. I wish that I wish the applicant pool was was larger, but compared to other agencies, we're doing a really good job. And the one thing about Frederick, people don't leave this police department until it's time to retire. You see a lot of other police departments where they'll find a job that pays more. Sometimes they'll leave the profession altogether. We really pride ourselves on taking care. It's hard to get into this department. We really want to take the best of the best. And even once they get in, they're on probation for a long time. And we want to make sure that they're performing the way a police officer should perform. But once they're in the department, and they've passed all the tests, they don't want to leave, because we really do treat the officers, we treat them really well, and our community treats them really well. So recruiting, yeah, it's tough, but once we have officers, they don't want to go, and they don't want to go anywhere else. And a lot of the officers that we are hiring right now or officers from neighboring jurisdictions that, you know, and nothing against those other agencies, but those officers are coming to us saying, hey, we heard Frederick's the place to be. And, you know, whether it's the pay or the benefits or the community support, we're actually recruiting officers from other departments rather than the reverse. So, you know, I always wish we were getting more applications, but the folks we get are really good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. That's a great question.
I have a question, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a ride-along program? When we lived in Montgomery County, I rode along with the county police one evening. It was very instructive. Do you have a ride-along program here in the city?
We sure do. We just suspended it right now because of the increase, the COVID spike. You know, just we want to protect our officers and also our ride-alongs. So we're trying to keep it one person to a car for right now. But yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it puts a little bit of extra stress on the officer because they have to worry about themselves and someone else. But I think that it's invaluable when someone gets a chance to ride along and they see what our officers do every day and how they interact with the community. It's you know, it's just, I think it's fantastic. And we've actually had a lot of people in my career that have been against the police. We were able to convince them to come out for 4 hours to ride along with us. And after 4 hours, it totally changed how they felt about law enforcement. So I love the idea of doing ride-alongs. We just need to wait until it's a little bit safer before we bring the community into our police cars.
To those of our neighbors here in Warman's Mill, I did it in Montgomery County with the county police department. Once this program starts up again, I would encourage any of you who are interested to go do it, because you'll see a different side of life and you'll see how good or bad, or probably how good these officers really are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. A couple more months, hopefully we'll be back. We'll be back to that.
Well, I don't see any more questions. Okay, so we want to head off. It's 8 o'clock today, and Chief, we want to thank you, and John and Wiles, want to thank you so much. It's been fascinating, very, very interesting.
Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it, and y'all take care and be safe. Stay warm.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, before we close down, this has nothing to do with this presentation, but does anyone know when the services for Gail is going to be?
No.
No,
No.
haven't heard. It'll be a virtual presentation. You can do it from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church on the 5th of February, 11 o'clock in the morning. It'll also be open to a certain number of people at the church, but it depends on what the COVID situation is. Thanks
Okay,
for asking, Ann.
thank you.
Okay. Well, everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night.